That sinister-looking object behind me is a Nato submarine. With one other, it came up just the other evening through the narrow gap that separates Lough Foyle from the sea. It's been here for the past few nights, anchored in company with a long row of impressive-looking Dutch ships who have been taking part in a NATO exercise. They look very impressive from the Donegal side, perhaps because they're so close to it. It's a question, in fact, just how close ought they to be? Put it another way, how does Lough Foyle stand politically? Are its waters British waters or Irish waters? That's a knotty problem and one that we'll have to come back to in a minute. But for the moment, we're here to have a look at two of the villages on the Inishowen Peninsula on the Donegal side of Lough Foyle. They are Greencastle and Moville. Moville is perhaps the better known of the two of them. With a population of about 1,000, it's about 3 times larger than its sister village 3 miles down the coast. But Greencastle has a history too, and it's quite proud of it. It commands the entrances to the loch, and for the best part of 4 centuries, it was a very strategic stronghold indeed.
The story of Greencastle and its fortifications is in many ways that of Inishowen itself. When this rambling mass of ruins was a new castle in 1305, the history of the peninsula and its successive waves of conquerors had already been half written. Richard de Burgh, the Red Earl of Ulster, built it to protect his precarious foothold in Donegal. By 1812, the bogeyman was Napoleon, and this fort, now a hotel, was the logical extension of one of the 6 Martello towers built to resist the invaders who never arrived. There's the architecture of peace, too. These old Coast Guard cottages, for instance, and the rather stark but essentially functional outline of Greencastle's modern pier. It's a well-patronized pier with plenty of water for the 30 and 50-foot boats, which are probably the little town's chief money spinners. Moville harbour isn't so well off. The contrast between the sleek lines of a modern navy and the crumbling fabric of this wooden jetty hardly needs to be underlined. The jetty, incidentally, together with nearby Carrick-a-Rory Pier and almost everything on the Moville waterfront, is owned by the Derry Harbour Board, nor is it the most popular of landlords. Nowadays, since the 130-year-old ferry from Derry to Moville stopped running, Moville's small fishing fleet has the unsatisfactory remains of the place to itself. The boats, in fact, are laid up for most of the year, and the short salmon season in Lough Foyle is the only time when they go into action. Moville fishermen have seen better days, as one of them, Charlie McLaughlin, explained. Mr. McLaughlin, how old are you now?
82 and a half.
And
82 and 6 months.
Of those 82 years and 6 months, how many of them have you spent fishing?
Well, that was roughly 60 years, I would say. I would be at it early, you know. I was at it very young.
When did you start, in fact?
Well, I don't say it would be about 16 or 18.
Now, in the years since you started to fish, have you seen many changes in Moville?
No, well, any changes I seen was hardly noticeable. You know what I mean? The numbers now big in it.
Is there more money now than there used to be?
Oh, there is. There's no doubt about it.
At the same time, it seems as if the fishing now is less popular than it used to be in the past. Is this true?
It is.
What's the reason for this?
Well, now you need to ask me another one. I think the fault is the price, you know, is the wrong way to go on it. You see, there's different markets. Send them to England and Dublin. Different places, you know.
What do the young people in Moville do? Do they go into the fishing?
No, any of them can't get out of it. That's one thing they're going to keep clear of.
And where will they go then?
They go to England, Scotland.
And livelihood of Moville has shifted. The sea is almost deserted, and the little harbour is falling into disuse. The commercial and business life of the town, however, has prospered. Moville, the plain of the ancient tree, or Bunafubble, the older parochial name, is a quietly well-off town. Or, if there is gaiety, it's not quite the same brand it knew at the end of the 18th century. Then it was the location for a weekly whisky fair, and the famous Inishowen malt flowed freely. Today, the traffic to and from Moville has a different character.
Children on holidays, as I think even the most devoted parents will admit, are often something of a mixed blessing. Their timetables don't always coincide with those of their parents. They don't always want to do the same things. And very often it's raining. What to do with them? The trouble is that in many areas, the local development committees seem to think that the catering for this particular aspect of the community, the juvenile side of the community, comes at the end of a long list of priorities behind hotels, beaches, car parks, and this sort of thing. Here in Moville, they've taken a rather different point of view, and they've started with it. They've started, in fact, with the most fascinating arrangement of swings, of seesaws, of things to climb, and even a well-built little hut that the children can go into when it rains. Now, this has obviously been a great success. Certainly the parents who've come here and who've returned here show that. But it's not only that, of course. It's a playground for the children of Moville itself, and they can play here all the year round.
Children aren't the only ones to be catered for. There's a fiendishly difficult crazy golf course, for example. This, and an increasing amount of allied development work, is the concern of men like Alex Diver.
Mr. Diver, you're a treasurer of the local development committee. How much did the children's playground scheme cost?
The children's playground scheme, together with the cost of the other improvements on the shore front, It was a little over £20,000.
And where did this money come from?
Board Faulty allocated 16,000, Donegal County Council 3,000, and the local committee 1,100.
How was the local committee's contribution raised?
The local committee got together after we were notified of the grant, and we put a sort of levy on the business houses, just according to the nature of the business that they were engaged in.
And how long did it take them to collect the money?
About a fortnight.
Now, apart from the children's playground scheme, what else has the development committee been doing?
The development committee has spent something over £2,000 on the shore front here. They erected new shelters, bathing boxes and paths along the shore front.
Mr. Dibber, what are your plans for the future?
Our plans for the future would include a wish that the Derry Harbour Board and Board Faulty could reach agreement about developing the old wooden wharf. As you know, part of the scheme had to be abandoned owing to some misunderstanding between both bodies. Next to that, if we were successful in securing another grant, we would like to extend the footpaths along the shore front to further towards Greencastle.
Greencastle, not to be outdone, has a respectably old golf course with what is virtually a brand new clubhouse. It attracts scores of visitors from Derry over 20 miles away and has seen something of a boom in the last few years. Few clubs in Ireland can rival this one for its naturally unspoilt setting within earshot of the sea. For the less energetic visitor, traditional tourist attractions like this are hidden around every corner.
It's amazing how much of Ireland's finest scenery still remains unknown to most of us. This is Kinnigo Bay, just a few miles away from Greencastle and Moville. Even on a misty autumn day, you can still get some hint of its quite breathtaking loveliness. Certainly the Inishowen Peninsula offers lots of scope for intelligent tourist development.
Greencastle has its own development committee too, and this, as shown by one of its members, Paddy Dooley, is more than usually adept at getting things done.
Dooley, you're chairman of the local development committee, which was turned into a limited company some time ago. What are the main areas of development you're interested in?
Well, we're interested in the pier and housing and water supply and, of course, the golf club.
All this implies a fairly substantial investment. How much of the money for these projects has been raised locally?
Well, very, very little of it, unfortunately. We've just £300 that we won on Tidy Town competition here, which we put back into the development, and we've got the rest of it from the Donegal County Council and from the department.
How do you explain the fact that in this very small community with about 300 people, such a great deal of money and time and so on has been expended?
Well, of course, the fishing industry here has increased tremendously in the last 5 or 6 years. And there's a great potential here in the area for fishing and, of course, together with tourism.
Where is your main source of tourism in this particular area?
Well, we're living here within 20 miles of Derry, a population of, say, 70,000 of a population. And of course, they're a great help to the tourists here and a great attraction.
Would you say at the same time that tourism is the most important side of your activity?
I wouldn't think so, really. I would say fishing is more, simply because it's a whole year-round trade and it's a help to the village, more income from it in the whole year. Tourism, of course, is a very short period, and of course, therefore, fishing is more an interest to the village.
Another member of the committee who's concerned with the fishing industry is Charlie Kavanagh. Mr. Kavanagh, does the distance of Greencastle from a major urban centre like Dublin seriously affect your fish marketing arrangements?
No, that doesn't affect it. The transport of fish has not affected at all, because fish caught here on the pier tonight are on sale in the Dublin market tomorrow morning. So we send fish there by direct lorry service nightly, and at the peak periods we send about 30 tonnes per week.
Gerald Haydock is Chief Executive of the Foyle Commission.
Mr. Haydock, what exactly are the responsibilities of the Foyle Commission?
Well, they're laid down in our Act that we must protect, develop, manage, and improve the fisheries in this particular area.
How do you set about doing this?
Well, we set about doing this by regulations, restriction of netting, setting up a hatchery to restock the river, and generally looking after the fishery from day-to-day basis.
Has the establishment of the Commission tended to remove possible sources of friction between the two communities?
Well, I should say definitely yes. But really, we're much more concerned with the fishery and the people that are concerned with the fishery. This really comprises of two groups, anglers and netsmen. We're not really concerned with where they come from, so long as they fish within our own particular area.
For all the fishing that goes on, however, the sea is not the area's only asset. Sheep do well on the otherwise barren mountain pastures. Livestock are husbanded, herds driven to market. This part of the Inishowen Peninsula isn't the very best place in the world for farmers. The strip of land between the mountains and the sea is narrow, and the land on the whole isn't very profitable. Many of the farmers, however, have shown great adaptability to the modern methods that bring increased efficiency and increased productivity. And some of them have been very successful indeed. Let's have a look at what one family, the Burns family, have been able to do in less than 20 years. This sort of thing may be small beer to a big urban dairy, but out here in Inishowen, it's the evidence of a great deal of hard and satisfying work. This particular farm, with some 35 cows, has a milk run extending for about 5 miles in all directions and several hundred customers. Burns, how long has it been since you started this particular business here?
Well, we started up about 1952.
And what stages has it gone through since you started?
Well, we started off hand milking, was about 10 cows, and delivering about 10 to 20 gallons, and gradually grew on then till we got a bucket plant.
The amount of plant you have here seems to imply a very substantial capital investment. Did you raise all this money yourselves?
Well, as we went on, we raised it and built up with profits.
To what extent did you rely on government grants and things like that?
Well, just as they came available, we took advantage of them when they came into force.
As it stands at the moment, the plant is very highly mechanized. How many people do you need to work it?
Well, one man can operate the milking plant, the cows, and one man to bring in the silage and work the tractors and all, with a bit of extra labour at silage time.
That's all we need now.
What prospects do you see for expansion in the future?
Well, I'm quite happy going as I am. Feel like expanding. I think there's a creamery going to be set up in any shown area. Could take a surplus milk if I did like to expand. But as I am, I'm quite satisfied.
For a look at another type of farming, we talked to Pat Canny, who lives just beyond Greencastle.
Mr. Canny, what's the land like for farming around here?
Oh, it's fairly good. Fairly good.
What size is your own farm?
About 15 acres.
And what way do you work it?
Well, it's tillage and grazing.
Which is the better, the more profitable of these two sides of farming?
Well, if you would take it per acre, the tillage is the best, I think, if you had an outlet for the crop, but we're too far from the markets here, you see. Dublin's our nearest market for them things. It's too far away.
What prospects do you see for this type of farming in this area?
Well, it's hard to tell. Free trade now, if we get into dairy, it may make a difference.
Have you ever been tempted to leave the land?
No, not a bit of it.
From one sort of tradition, from one sort of tenacity, back to another. It would be strange if a seafaring community like this did not build boats. What is remarkable is how well they've been building them and for how long, as Mr. James MacDonald made clear.
Mr. MacDonald, how long have your family been building boats here in Moville?
Well, the MacDonald family have been building boats since 1750.
That makes a total of 200 years?
200 years, yes.
What sort of boats are you building now?
Well, at the present, we are building a 28-foot fishing boat for Ballycastle, County Antrim.
Where do all your boats go? Are they confined to the immediate neighbourhood or not?
No, all round the whole coast of Ireland, from Donegal to Mayo and right round to Belfast Lough.
Is the family tradition in boat building an important thing?
Well, it is in a way, because when it was handed down to you, you like to carry the business on as usual and never let the boat building trade die out.
What prospects do you see in the next couple of years?
Well, the demand for boats at present has been very high, as we have been booked up now for the next 2 years. It shows a very good demand.
James MacDonald's trade isn't affected very much, if at all, by the border. And not only commerce, but history, tradition and culture often make nonsense of the divisions with which men try to carve up a country. Where is the border anyway? What is the significance, political or otherwise, of rows of ships like these steaming up and down within a few hundred yards of the Donegal coast? One of the Greencastle fishermen, recalled some of the background to the present situation.
Mr. Cannon, your family have been living in this area for a long time, and so have you. How long have you actually been fishing in these waters?
About 33 years.
And can you tell me, from those 33 years of experience, where the border is drawn in Lough Foyle?
No, I couldn't tell you that, but I have no idea.
Is it in fact a disputed matter?
Well, as far as I know, it is.
Have there been any incidents which tend to bear on this dispute?
A few years ago there was, where there was a sailor to be arrested and taken ashore here at Moville. And for some reason they discovered, to play safe, they thought it would be better to take him to Lough Swilly. And arrested him there.
And by doing this, they hope to avoid the possibility of any doubt arising as to the validity of any arrest.
Well, that was the idea as far as I know.
Apart from incidents like this, how does the ambiguity over the border in Lough Foyle affect you or other people who fish here?
Well, as far as the border's concerned, we don't have now any trouble. We get on very well with the fishermen in the north.
To the Foyle Commission, it presents no problem.
As far as Lough Foyle and its fishermen are concerned, where exactly do you draw the political border?
Well, fortunately, we don't have to draw any political border. From our point of view, Lough Foyle and the fishermen that fish in it are the concern of the Commission, no matter where they come from.
Mr. McLaughlin, where do they draw the border in Lough Foyle?
Well, I couldn't tell you. That's the best way to put it. And I think nobody else could tell you.
Perhaps it'll all be fixed up one day, and a way found out of this almost Gilbertian situation. Still, as things stand at the moment, this watery no man's land is, in some ways, every man's land.
Moville and Greencastle are, in a certain sense, complementary. Moville doesn't rely exclusively on tourism. Greencastle doesn't rely exclusively on fishing. Perhaps they're more useful to each other than they realize. As for the waters of Lough Foyle, they're not exactly troubled, but the certain amount of confusion which affects their status doesn't really seem to damage the livelihood of the fishermen who work on it or affect the cooperation between the communities on both sides of the border. Perhaps it's just as well that way.